Hi guys, so I was asked to do a response to this YouTuber. He's a Brexiteer. He's fully on board with Boris Johnson. So let's hear what he had to say and I'll come back with some comments.
Well, if the EU didn't take the UK as being serious on no deal before this weekend, I would have thought they certainly would now.
Okay, we're 7 seconds in and I have to respond. Okay, the EU have been taking the UK seriously surrounding a no deal. When the idea of so some years ago, the UK said, if we don't get what we want, we're going to walk away without a deal. Theresa May said, no deal is better than a bad deal. So what did the EU do? They told their member states, they told governments and companies in the EU to prepare for the possibility of a no deal as an insurance policy. They said, look, we don't want to go down that road, but if necessary, you should be ready for it. So basically, they disarmed the UK from their threat of a no deal. Now, let me be clear here, the EU would prefer to have a deal, but they have instructed their governments to prepare for the possibility of no deal. But this is not something new. This is not something from last week. This has been going on for a long time now.
Front page after front page. I've got one here with me from the Express. You can.
Okay, the Express. So the Express is a pro-Brexit, pro-Tory newspaper. So of course they're going to say that Brexit is fantastic, and of course they're going to say that Boris is doing a great job. So they say Boris says no deal Brexit is a good outcome. But the UK government last year did an impact assessment. It was called Operation Yellowhammer. And they said there would be chaos at the border. They would, not my words, the British government's words. There would be chaos at the border. There would be a shortage of food, medicine for the UK. They would have to commandeer land and, for example, oil refineries. There were different cases, like for example, a worst case scenario or a best case scenario. But even in the best case scenario, it would be extremely disruptive to the UK economy and to society in general. Not my words, that's Operation Yellowhammer. I suggest you look it up yourself if you don't believe me. So Boris Johnson's now turning around and saying that Operation Yellowhammer is a good outcome. And you're going along with this. Once again, Operation Yellowhammer is not my baby, it's Boris Johnson's.
You can see there, a Boris no deal Brexit is a good outcome. And just 38 days now till no deal. Boris Johnson to give the EU just 38 days from today to strike a Brexit deal, warning that if there's no breakthrough by the 15th of October, Britain will accept a no deal scenario and move on.
But okay, as I said before, the EU have been preparing for this. Have the UK been preparing for this? Well, Michael Gove seems to be doing something now, but we've seen stories about how important software and bureaucracy that's required on the border is not ready yet. It hasn't been tested in some cases. And we have 38 days.
Boris quoted in brief that remark saying, "We are now entering the final phase of our negotiations with the EU. The EU have been very clear about the timetable. I am too." Boris says there needs to be an agreement with our European friends by the time of the European Council on October 15th. If there's going to be enforced by the end of the year, of course, that's when the transition period ends. And Boris, there needs to be an agreement with our European friends by that date. So there is no sense in thinking about timelines that go beyond that point. If we can't agree by then I do not see there'll be a free trade agreement between us, and we should both accept that and move on. Now this follows on from an interview with the Mail on Sunday.
Another pro-Tory, pro-Brexit newspaper. Okay, but go on.
With David Frost at the weekend. He basically made the point that, and I've talked about it on this channel before, that the EU in some ways it's felt like still think they're dealing with Theresa May's pushovers. You know, the lucky
Are you talking about David Davis?
that just sort of got pushed around all over the shop. Frost saying, we came in after a government negotiating team that had blinked and had its bluff called.
Okay, I'll agree that Theresa May's team was absolute crap. But why did Theresa May have a crap team? Because the ERG were putting pressure on her to hire Brexiteers for the negotiations. Now Boris Johnson has hired Brexiteers for the negotiations. And you're still complaining. You're saying, well, you know, the Brexiteers they had before were not good Brexiteers, but the Brexiteers we have now are much better. I have said this before. Michel Barnier's position on Brexit is irrelevant. Michel Barnier is there to do a job. In the same way, I don't care about the politics of my pilot when I'm on a plane. I care whether the pilot is able to fly the plane. With the Brexit, with the people Boris Johnson has selected, he selected people for ideological reasons, not for merit, which is ironic because the Tory party allegedly in the past banged on about we need the best people, you know, in our companies, we need the best people in Parliament, we need the brightest people. But when it comes to Brexit, no, you just have to be a sycophant.
At critical moments in the EU had learned to not take our word seriously. I mean, how damning is that, by the way? But that's another story. So Frost saying, so
the EU didn't take our word seriously. Now you're talking about ripping up the withdrawal agreement.
A lot of what we're trying to do this year is to get the EU to realise that we mean what we say, and they should take our position seriously. To demonstrate the government's readiness.
Why should anyone take anything Boris Johnson says seriously? Boris Johnson is a compulsive liar. He has thrown almost everyone he has ever met under a bus. Really, why should anyone take anything Boris Johnson has to say seriously?
For no deal, the PM has created a number 10 transition hub with officials across key departments said to be working at pace to prepare to trade without arrangements in place.
And you believe that the Tories are capable of doing this? Look at the disaster of COVID. Look at the disaster of PPE purchase, of the rolling out of the test and trace, of the lockdowns, and you believe that those are the people you trust to operate a transition hub? Really? You have a lot more faith in them than I do.
The unit, but with hand-picked officials across Whitehall, working with Michael Gove, who has led the government's work on No Deal. David Frost also quoted as saying,
Michael Gove was one of them who released, who was instrumental in writing he had a part in the writing of Operation Yellowhammer. So Michael Gove said there's going to be a disaster. And now you believe Michael Gove when he says, well, it's going to run smoothly. So in which case is Michael Gove lying?
We are not going to be a client state. We are not going to compromise on fundamentals of having control over our own laws. We are not going to accept level playing field provisions that lock us into the way the EU do things. We are not going to accept provisions that give them control over our money or the...
Sorry, what money? How does the EU control your money?
Way we can organise things here in the UK. And that should not be controversial, he makes that point. That's what being an independent country is about.
Once again, this is extremely offensive. It's offensive to people like Germany, like Ireland, like Italy, like France, like Belgium, like the Netherlands. Are these countries not independent in your eyes? I'd like to ask him, please explain to me how Germany is not an independent country, how France is not an independent country. You keep saying that you say, now we're independent, now that we're no longer a member of the EU. So I assume that these countries that I've given as examples are not independent. Please explain to me how they're not independent.
That's what the British people voted for, and that's
BS. The British people didn't vote for any of this. Where in the ballot, on the ballot paper, did it say anything about a withdrawal agreement? Did it say anything about a deal? Did it say anything about Northern Ireland? What you're doing is you're taking information that we have now and projecting it onto people back in 2016 who had no idea what they were voting for. People voted to leave the European Union. I'm not going over the pizza analogy once again. People didn't know what they were voting for. They voted to leave. And they didn't know anything. They had no understanding of what that actually meant.
That's what will happen at the end of the year, come what may. So for us, they're really making the point, as we have on this channel before, that this is the prize of Brexit. It's to have that flexibility. It's to have that freedom. It's to have that...
What flexibility? What freedom are you talking about? You just use adjectives that sound good and associate them with Brexit.
Ability, unconstrained by EU rules and regulations, and for the EU to try and take that away as the condition of a trade deal is completely unacceptable, and I'm glad to see the government still completely rejecting it. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab saying this week's talk are a wake-up call for the EU.
They still think that they are the Brexiteers. They still think that they're in a position that they can dictate the conditions. The EU laid out their negotiating position from the very beginning. The Brexiteer one seems to be changing all the time. Yes, we want a deal. No, we don't want a deal. Yes, we want a deal. No, we don't want a deal. Yes, we want a deal. No, we don't want a deal. We can get a deal. No, we can't get a deal. A deal is fantastic. No deal is okay. Now no deal is perfectly acceptable. How is it possible to change so often and still claim consistency?
Saying that all the UK is asking for is to be treated like any other country in free trade negotiations.
And once again, you don't understand what these trade negotiations are, or how they function, or what type of agreements you can have. I've said this before, the UK is not the same as Canada, and it's not the same as Japan or Australia. You keep thinking, we can have the same as Canada. Yes, but there's a big difference between the UK and Canada. Distance is one of them, and the economies are completely different as well.
Rob saying no other country would accept being bound or controlled by the EU's rules.
You're not controlled by the rules. You agree to rules. Are these people this dense? I want to play football, but I don't want to play by the rules. I want to play a sport. I play a sport with this guy. I don't know what his name is. The first thing we do before we play our game is we set our rules. Now, if I agree to the rules and you agree to the rules, does that mean we're governed by the rules? The game is governed by the rules. The agreement is governed by the rules, not the countries, not the people. The people can break the rules. You can break the rules. You keep presenting it as in a very weird way, that the UK is governed by the rules. No, the trade is governed by the rules. The UK can decide not to respect the rules. If you don't respect the rules, there are consequences. If I play a football game and I don't respect the rules, there are consequences. How is this so difficult to understand? I really struggle to understand why they don't understand that. The UK is not governed by rules. The trade is governed by rules. Now, are they trying to manipulate their listeners by saying we are governed by the rules? Or are they honestly misinformed? I don't know.
That's a straightforward point of principle. Telling the Andrew Marr show on BBC One, we'd much rather have a deal, and that's why we're continuing these negotiations with the EU. Now, Conservative MP John Redwood making...
Can you choose anyone who isn't a Brexiteer to back up your position? No deal with the EU is much better outcome than the EU is proposing. Time for the UK to move on, because John Redwood is not going to suffer if there's no deal. The people in Parliament are not going to suffer. They're not going to suffer the consequences of medical shortages or food shortages, for example. Now, when I say about food shortages, I'm not talking about, there will be nothing to eat. I mean, the selection you have at the moment will be reduced. And in some cases, food will become more expensive. But if you're a Tory MP who's earning 80,000 pounds a year, it's not a problem for you if the price of bread goes up a few pence. It is a problem for the people at the bottom of the scale, the people on the poverty line. For them, if there's even a small increase in the price of food or fuel or electricity or whatever, it has a huge impact on them. The people telling you, don't worry about it, will not be impacted.
The point, no deal with the EU is a much better outcome than what the EU is proposing. Time for the UK to move on from talks going nowhere. And Nigel Farage...
And move on to what? Move on to where? To the WTO, where the EU has more and more power. It's, as I said before, it's like crushing your car. Maybe I stole this from James O'Brien, I don't remember. But it's like crushing your car, then going to the car dealer and the car dealer saying, okay, here is a car I'm going to sell you. And you say, no, I don't want that car. I'm better off with no car. And then you go back home and then you realize you have to spend a 3-hour journey on foot to work. Because you used to have a car and it took 15 or 20 minutes. Now it takes 3 hours. But you decided, you thought it was better not to have the car. This is basically what they're trying to sell people. I'm going to end the video here, guys. This has gone on much longer than it should have. Let me know in the comment section what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?